Composition can be confusing for photographers, but in this video I'm going to start to explain to you how to go beyond the rule of thirds so you can start composing your photos in a different way. You see compositional tools like the rule of thirds, I'm just going to refer to that from now on, but assume I mean all the other types of grids and so on that you can use for composition. Were invented in order to make composition easier for us. And the way that they do that is by introducing balance. So you see in this video now, I've positioned myself on the rule of thirds. I'm on one of those crossover points. And my picture on the monitor is on one of the other ones. And that allows me to establish some balance in a simple way to do it. But where photographers go wrong is they take it so literally. Everyone is and everything is always exactly on the rule of thirds. The whole point of these compositional tools was to try to introduce balance for people. And composition ultimately is all about balance. How much weight does a certain object have in the picture? And that can be down to things like the brightness or the darkness or the contrast, saturation levels. So what I'm saying is it's kind of a misconception to think that all of these ideas of composition we have should fit into these rules. It's the same as when people say your eye is drawn to the brightest part of an image. It's just kind of nonsense. It's true sometimes, but it's also not always. Like this image here, you're not looking at the brightest part of the image, are you? So you get my point. If we look at the rule of thirds on this picture, we can immediately see that this does not fit into the rule of thirds. Her face is all the way up here. If we go through, if we press O on the keyboard, we can cycle through some of these other compositional things. And if we wanted to, we can start to pretend that some of these perhaps fit, but they don't. And the reason that this picture is so well balanced is because whilst her head is off to the side over here, we have this swish and movement of the scarf. Her jacket, her coat is pulled out to the side here, and this is what's giving us our balance in the picture. So this is what I'm talking about with balance. This has nothing to do with the rule of thirds, but the picture is well balanced. I'd like to thank today's sponsor of the video, BenQ, and I want to show you the ScreenBar Plus that they sent to me. This is actually a really cool bit of kit, and I'm using it all the time now. It has a USB-A, the original shape USB connector. I just plug that into one of the USB sockets on the back of my monitor, and that powers the device. It simply clips onto the top of your monitor. It has like a counterweight. You get the little control wheel that goes on your desk, and it's very simple to just flick backwards and forwards between adjusting the brightness level or adjusting the temperature level. And you also have an auto mode as well if you just press the button on the left here, and that will auto adjust the light for you. The unit is rated up to 500 lux, and that's my working environment. I like the fact that it isn't on the desk as well. I love having a very minimalist, very simple desk to work at. I don't like having lots of distractions when I'm working. Spend a lot of time in front of a computer. Devices like this are designed to reduce eye strain over time, and it has made a difference. I've been using this over the last couple of weeks since I've had it, and there is a noticeable difference. But I like working in an overall dark environment, and the fact that the light is on the monitor is creating a really even spread of light across my devices. And there's no glare or hot spots or areas that are too dark. Everything's just evenly lit right across the board. It gets a big thumbs up for me. I'm really pleased with it. It's the sort of device which I probably wouldn't have looked at had someone else sent it to me, but now that I've got it, I'm like, yes, this is really actually good, and I'm using it all the time. I'm using it every day. This is my main light now, and it works. So if you like it and you think you might like one, links in the description, go and grab yourself one. I think they're really cool. And thanks BenQ for sending it to me. I do appreciate it because I'm using it all the time. These rules that we talk about aren't meant to be taken quite so literally. So in a moment, I'm going to show you some images, and we're going to look through some of the compositional elements that are essentially not present. And by doing that, I think you'll learn something about composition and balancing pictures. But I want to sort of draw a line under the rule of thirds and just say at this stage that you should accept that this is a tool that does work, but it's not a rule. It's only a guide, and it's a guide established to try and help photographers or artists create balance in their pictures. Compositions and the balancing of pictures shouldn't be so obvious to the viewer most of the time, but there's many times when it also does work, and this is a sense that we have to develop over time. All of you that struggle with composition should understand you have a massive visual database in your mind, a repertoire of images stored from music videos, films, magazines, television, adverts even, anything like that. You have all of that information within you already. You innately already understand a lot of composition and balance. But when we start throwing in things that look like mathematics into the ideas of composition, it throws us off, and we start trying to analyze compositions based on these mathematical grids and overlays, and we stop trying to look at things and feel like, how do we feel about them? How does the balance feel in this image? You can judge a photograph and you can say, yes, that is a good photograph, but you might not like your own work when you try and take pictures because you're not accessing that database in your mind. You're stuck on grids, but they're also blocking you. So we need to get away from that kind of mathematical part of the mind and more into the imagination and creative part of the brain, where we can actually look at something and say, how does this balance? So we see here in this picture. So we could say, is this on the rule of thirds? Or we could say, this bar's on the rule of thirds. But look where her face is. Her face is not on the rule of thirds. This is, again, what I'm saying. We can make out as if this is following the rule of thirds. We can say that perhaps loosely it is, she's holding at this point, but this holding on to this thing is not the feature. We have a nice colour complement going on between the jacket and her lipstick, and they're thinking about this very carefully in terms of colour palette. You see, when I start talking about things like that, we're talking about the balance of colours, the harmony that we've got with this yellowy kind of tone here, which is very subdued. But there's a lot of it, and the way that balances with the weight of this jacket and then the red lipstick, this is where the balance kind of gets introduced, and we can feel it's slightly offset, it's slightly off to the side, but these shadow lines and so on that we've got up here, this kind of helps give some weight back onto this side again, but overall the picture works. So we can do the same thing here again. We could say, oh, she's almost on the rule of thirds, she's not on the rule of thirds. Even if we take out the text bit at the bottom, we could perhaps say, yes, she's a bit closer, like her nose is on this line. You know, you could do that kind of thing. But again, it's trying to make compositional elements fit. If we cycle through, pressing O on the keyboard, like you might say, oh, look, her arm goes this way, and then it goes here, and then this kind of goes this way. You can say that, and you can try and make it fit if you want to. Yeah, and we could do the same thing, I don't know, with this. You could say, oh, look how it sweeps around in this direction, and this is on her eye. But you're forcing things to make things fit. And what we're at with the balance here is kind of the pose works nicely because she's got her arms this way and her arms that way. So we're establishing balance across this diagonal, and we're getting some balance from her hair with the movement in her, because we can see that she's moving. This picture is of a person who's moving. We can see blur in the clothing here, and we can see blur in her hair, and that's what's putting this together, and it just works. I think the next picture is kind of really interesting. If we look at this one, this can appear to not work at all, but she is framed by this archway here, and then we've got tons of space, but you can balance dead space with people. So you see a lot of pictures that are very strictly on the rule of thirds still have a large amount of dead space within them. Balance in here again is all of this dead space, there's enough of it to counterbalance where the person is. So we can press Shift and O, and we can do, like this is where I'm saying people will do things like this to try and find, this would be a perfect example. Oh, her hand touches her belt, and then this goes round, which mimics this. No, this isn't the focus of the image. This is the focus of the image, and her clothing. Because with these magazines, a lot of the time, the clothing is a huge element. Even when we come back to this first picture again, this clothing matters. This is very carefully styled. In each case, look how the gloves, everything matches. This is very carefully styled. This shade of lipstick is to complement the coat that she's wearing. So this stuff is done very, very deliberately. And so we're seeing the contrast of no detail at all with quite a lot of fine, intricate detail. That's what's giving us the balance. And this is hard to explain in technical terms, and this is why a lot of these ideas for composition that we have start to fall apart. Again, here's another example. So whilst this is a photo of the cover of Harper's Bazaar, we end up with this, where she's bang in the middle. But does it balance? Yes. Why does it balance? Well, let's look at it. Her arm's sticking out here on this side, and the umbrella's coming out on this side. And that works. And we've got tons of stuff going on. We've got a lot of detail, a lot of accessories and so on. There's a lot going on with the clothing here, and the colour ranges as well. but it works, it balances. So this is done carefully. It's cropped off to the side here. This doesn't matter. The point is that the picture works. And this image here, I really like this. So now when I show you this, you should be now not thinking rule of thirds. You should be starting to think, oh, look at the color range. Look how they're all in this orange yellow tone. But we're wondering what the story is. We're starting to think about, what does this mean? Kind of interesting that we can't actually even see her face. So some interesting choices have been made here. But I think we can start to, without having to try to explain why it works, we can say, yes, I like the look of this. I really like this picture. I think it's really good. This actually fits the rule of thirds. And that's fine, because it balances well. One final image with tons of movement. It's a very interesting photograph. It's very unusual. Could we say that that's on the rule of thirds because it does that? Or should we just be looking at the balance? So the balance here for me is this amount of white with this amount of black. And then you've got her foot and face pointing in the same direction together. And this line's kind of giving you that too. So it's giving you that sense of direction. And there's all of this material as well. And we think this is probably a wall along here. It's just an interesting photograph. It's unusual. So you might say to me, look, these compositions were so weird and different. How do I use that in my photography? And the way that you start to do this is that you move away from trying to think about compositional rules and compositional elements and start simply trying to instinctively balance your work. You can even do this around the house or in the park, or anywhere you go, you can start looking at compositions. You can even do it with your mobile phone screen when you look at things. But start trying to make things balance and start to try to feel. What I want to embed into you is the idea that you have a massive visual repertoire, a database in your head of stored images from all the movies that you've seen, all those old films. You've learnt this stuff already. By the time you hit your teenage years, you've had so much composition and visual imagery thrust at you that you do know this stuff already. All you need to do now is go out and start shooting and composing in a much more instinctive manner, looking at your work afterwards and thinking, did this work or didn't it work? If it didn't work, try and think about how you could have done it better. It's not even so much a case of saying, why didn't it work? If it didn't work, it didn't work. But the question is, what could you have done to make it work? How could you have moved and done it better where it could have balanced and it could have worked out for you? And that's the key. It's this constant practicing and repetition of, but it's within you. This skill to balance is within you already. Just in the same way as I used that example with music. You have it within you to recognize a good song. You have it within you to recognize good work by other people. And so too you have it within you to balance compositions well already. If you found this useful, you could buy me a coffee. You know, I like drinking coffee. There's a link in the description. Subscribe to see more videos. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it as well, and drop me a comment if you've got anything to say, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.